The delay caused by the industry minister. We already knew that the former Minister of Defense worked for Hill & Knowlton lobby firm that promote CASA 295 from EADS, a competitor of Alenia C-27Gs. Interesting enough, now, the current Chief of Staff of the Industry Minister, William King, has been Senior Vice President for the very same firm. Can the Minister of Industry assure this House that his Chief of Staff was not involved in any meetings with Public Works and National Defense for that bid, and that he recused himself from that?
I've only been in this House for just over 3 years. That is the lowest of the low. That is outrageous. I demand he retract and apologize. Skimming the bottom of the barrel. You say that outside this House, and then we'll talk about the lawsuit that will prevail, I'm sure.
Mr. Speaker, the controversy over the reenactment of the Battle of the Plains of Abraham shows a clear lack of judgment on the part of André Junot, who's the President of the Battlefields Commission, and the complicity of the Conservatives who are driven by their ideology.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the response is clear and the answer is no, especially after threats and calls for violence that we've witnessed in the Quebec region, since the Bloc and the Parti Québécois have led to an outcry in this file. These threats and calls for violence are not part of Quebecers' values. This is the Bloc's ideology.
The Honourable Member for Montmorency.
Mr. Speaker, just hold on a sec. The truth is important. I want to set the record straight. The Bloc Québécois has always condemned calls for violence in all forms. Is that clear? Mr. Speaker, it's clear that we don't have the same notion of condemning and denouncing. Here's an advertisement from the Quebec member and the member for Montmorency. The leader of the Bloc needs to be quiet if he wants me to give an answer. We're in a democracy here, Mr. Speaker.
Use offensive expressions in this House. Mr. Speaker, I asked a question to the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, and she answered, and we have her words here, word for word. She said threats and calls to violence are not part of Quebec values. Instead, it is part of the Bloc Québécois ideology, end of quote. Thanks to a decision made by the Bloc Québécois that funded this type of material, which is absolutely disgusting and unacceptable for Canadians. What I have here is a newspaper called Le Québécois. This newspaper is the one in which the leader called for violence and threats to be used by the Quebec media, whereas the Bloc Québécois funded threats and calls to violence. So what I would ask is unanimous consent to table these documents here in the House so that everyone knows about this in the Parliament of Canada and the House.
Can the Minister tell Canadian women what she and her department did to ensure a gender-based analysis was done on the budget? What did she and her department do in concrete terms to ensure gender equity on this budget?
The Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll thank the member for her question. She will know, as I did already answer this question in committee not too long ago, that Department of Finance has actually been conducting gender-based analysis on their tax measures since Budget 2006. And I note for the record that it's not a coincidence that actually happened when a Conservative government came into office.
The Honourable Member.
Women into the workforce in non-traditional jobs. The Council for Access for Women to Work said that one of its requests would be approved. However, when they published a press statement saying that the government's approach to pay equity wasn't sufficient, the project was refused. Why is the government punishing this council? Because they have simply denounced their position on pay equity. The Honourable Minister for State.
The member will know that all that have been approved, all organizations who applied for funding that have been approved or declined are in the process of being notified. The member will also know that I rely on my officials because I believe that they are highly professional, highly skilled. They understand what the terms and the criteria are in terms of who will receive funding from either community or partnership fund, and I respect the decisions that they brought for me for my approval.
The Honourable Member.
That it is not the minister responsible for status of women who takes the lead role on the issues of concern to Canadian women.
Member for her question. As she knows, I did in fact sit on Status of Women Committee for a couple of years, and we did turn out a number of exceptional reports on gender-based analysis, so I'm quite familiar with the process as she is, and she knows her question is not in line with how it works. But I do want to say, Mr. Speaker, that she's very well aware of the fact as well that we announced an action plan working towards women's equality in Budget 2008. I invited the committee members to participate, and all women in this House, to participate in the development of that plan, which will have 3 pillars: economic security, leadership, and ending violence against women.
The Honourable Member.